Bantam Doubleday Dell Audio Publishing presents Star Wars, Planet of Twilight by Barbara Hambly. The first to die was a midshipman named Koth Barak. One of his fellow crew members on the New Republic escort cruiser Adamantine found him slumped across the table in the Deck 9 break room, where he'd gone half an hour previously for a cup of caffeine. 20 minutes after Barak should have been back to post, Gunnery Sergeant Gally Wover went looking for him, certain that he'd clicked into the infolog banks just to see if anybody mentions the mission. Of course nobody was going to mention the mission. Though Chief of State Leia Organa Solo was accompanied by the Adamantine, her journey to the Meridian sector was an entirely unofficial one. The Rights of Sentience party would have argued quite correctly that Seti Ashgad, the man she was to meet at the rendezvous point just outside the Chorios systems, held no official position on his home world of Chorios. To arrange an official conference would be to give tacit approval to his and the Rationalist Party's demands, which was, when it came down to it, the reason for the talks. When Sergeant Wover saw the young man, head on the break table, eyes shut, she called to him. No response. She pecked the commander's code on the wall panel. "Sir? Wover here. One of the midshipmen's down. The meds haven't gotten here yet, but... No, sir, I don't know what it is, but you might want to check with Her Excellency's flagship and let them know." Within moments, the med droids arrived and began pumping stimulants and anti-shock into the boy's veins. Wover could see the initial diagnostic lines on the screens. No virus, no bacteria, no poison. No foreign material in Koth Barak's body at all. The lines dipped steadily toward zero, then went flat. Seti Ashgad turned from the bubble of the observation viewport to regard the woman who sat coolly watchful in one of the lounge's gray leather chairs. "We have a complicated situation on Chorios, Your Excellency." "We, meaning whom, Master Ashgad?" Leia Organa Solo was a petite, almost fragile-looking woman. Her relative youth would have surprised anyone who didn't know that from the age of 17 she'd been heavily involved in the rebellion, spearheaded by her father and the great stateswoman Mon Mothma. The inhabitants of Chorios, or only some of them? "All of them." Ashgad stood close to her, trying to dominate her with his height, but she looked up at him with an expression that told him she knew exactly what he was trying to do, and he stepped back. "All of us," he corrected himself. "Newcomers and Therans alike." Leia folded her hands on her knee, the wide velvet sleeves and voluminous skirts of her crimson ceremonial robe picking up the soft sheen of the lamps overhead. Once she would have remarked tartly that he was omitting mention of the largest segment of the planet's population. Those who were neither the technological post-imperial newcomers nor the ragged Theran cultists who haunted the cold and waterless wastes, but ordinary farmers. Now she gave him silence, waiting to see what else he would say. Ashgad continued in the rich baritone that so closely resembled the recording she had heard of his father. "I should explain that Chorios is a barren and hostile world. Without massive technology, it is literally not possible to make a living there." Leia looked at him skeptically. "The political prisoners sent to Chorios by the Grismath dynasty seem to have managed for the past 700 years. "Ah, I see Your Excellency has studied the history of the sector."
He tried to sound pleased. Enough to know that the Grismaths shipped their political prisoners there in the hopes that they'd starve to death, and set automated gun stations all over the planet to keep them from being rescued.
I know that the prisoners not only didn't oblige them by dying, but that their descendants and the descendants of the guards are still farming the planet, while the Grisma homeworld is itself just a ball of charred radioactive waste. The only reason Leia knew this much about Chorios was that her father had once observed that Emperor Palpatine seemed to be using the world for its original purpose, as a prison. 40 years ago it had been rumored that the elder Seti Ashgad had been stranded on the isolated planet by agents of his political foe, then-Senator Palpatine. Those rumors had remained unproven until this second Ashgad had made contact with the Council in the wake of the squabbling on the planet and asked to be heard. "Do not meet with Ashgad," said the message that had reached Leia literally as she was preparing to board the shuttle to take her to her flagship. "Do not trust him, or accede to any demand that he makes." Leia went on, "I understood that the only inhabitants of the planet before recolonization recommenced after the fall of the Empire were descendants of the original prisoners and their guards." From a corner of the lounge, in the shadow of a dark-leaved dianthus vine, Ashgad's secretary Zim smiled. Leia wasn't sure what to make of her aversion to Zim. A small brown-skinned man with his black hair drawn up into a smooth topknot. It might be the looseness of his mouth or the flattened-looking tan eyes that never seemed to blink. She forced herself to look directly at him. "Are you one of the original Corians, Master Zim?" He said, "My ancestors were among those sent to Chorios by the Grismaths. Yes, Your Excellency." Something changed in his eyes, becoming preoccupied as if all his attention were suddenly directed elsewhere. Ashgad went on hastily, as if covering the other man's lapse. "The problem, Your Excellency, is that 750 years of complete isolation has made the old-timer population of Chorios into an iron-bound set of fanatical conservatives. You and I both know how that makes for superstition. One of the things my father tried to institute was a modern clinic in Hall. The farmers would rather take their sick to some Theran cult listener to be healed with power sucked down out of the air." He leaned forward confidingly. "It isn't only the newcomers that the Rationalist Party is trying to help, Your Excellency. It's the farmers themselves. Unless something is done to wrest control of the old Grismath gun stations away from the Theran cultists, who forbid any kind of interplanetary trade, these people are going to continue to live like the agricultural slaves they once were. There's a strong Rationalist Party on Chorios, and it's growing stronger. We want planetary trade with the New Republic. We want technology and proper exploitation of the planet's resources. Is that so harmful?" Leia raised an eyebrow. "The majority of the planet's inhabitants think it is." Ashgad gestured furiously. "The majority of the planet's inhabitants have been brainwashed by half a dozen lunatics who get loaded on bruchnial root and wander around the wasteland having conversations with rocks." Leia glanced out the port, which offered a spectacular view of the ice-green and lavender curve of Bruckness Chorios, whose largest moon had been designated as the orbital rendezvous of the secret meeting. The escort cruiser Adamantine was just visible. Below it, close to the bright triangle of colored stars that were the primaries of Bruckness, Nam, and Pedusis Chorios, and pathetically tiny against the cruiser's bulk, hung the cluster of linked bronze hulls that was Seti Ashgad's vessel, the Light of Reason. Even Leia's flagship, the Borealis, dwarfed it. Assembled of such small craft as could slip singly through the watchful screens of Chorios' ancient defensive installations, the Light would barely have served as a planet-hopper. It could never have taken a hyperspace jump. Hence, Leia thought uneasily, this mission. Even before she'd had the surreptitious message, their distance from the nearest New Republic bases on Duran, and their proximity to the one-time imperial satrapy of the anti-meridian sector, made her nervous. Seti Ashgad paced restlessly. "It isn't just that we newcomers are forbidden to bring in any ships larger than a personal flitter. or to let any out. The Theran habit of opening fire on any vessel over a certain size means that when equipment wears out, it can't be replaced except for an
Sample complete. Ready to continue?